I really see her as a ruthless opportunist who will say whatever needs to be said in order to secure power. Now, to your point, though, about her being described as a moderate, I think you're absolutely onto something there, because she really is not moderate by any standards. I think you look at Biden, there's lots that Biden says and has said over the course of his long career, which I really disagree with, but I think it would be fair to describe him as a liberal. Kamala Harris is a progressive, and she is a progressive who subscribes to all of the trendy progressive dogmas of our current age.
Joe Biden has selected Senator Kamala Harris as his running mate, ending months of speculation that the former Californian Attorney General and one-time Democratic presidential candidate would join his ticket. But what does this mean for the debate in the States? Does this improve Biden's chances in the upcoming election? Does this drag the Democrats' platform further to the left? And in the past, Harris has argued that she believed the women who stepped forward to say Biden made them uncomfortable with unwanted touching. What's changed with that accusation? And finally, what will a Biden presidency look like for the United Kingdom were he to win the election? Joining me to discuss, I'm absolutely delighted to say, is Madeline Kearns. Now, Madeline is a writer with the National Review, a conservative-leaning magazine in the States. Madeline is originally from Glasgow, I believe, aren't you?
Yes, that's correct.
And happens to be one of my favourite Twitter users. So thank you so much for joining Reason today.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
I honestly really think you're so good on... I watched a couple of YouTube clips on, especially around the self-ID debate and around J.K. Rowling's comments, and you were so good and so eloquent, and actually it's quite brave these days to speak up and say that biological sex is an immutable fact and that actually that women exist. So well done you.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, I know you yourself have dealt with hostile interview situations, so
it's quite something.
And then I think you're either the type of person who gets sort of flustered, and or you're the type of person who gets indignant. And I think I'm kind of indignant when I really think that what I'm saying is really reasonable. Then I think, why is this even controversial? You know, I really kind of just draw the line at the common sense places to draw the line. So anyway, I'm glad you appreciated that.
No, I definitely did. Now, am I right in saying that you originally trained as a teacher in Scotland?
Yeah, that's right. So I did that after I graduated from St Andrews. I did a year teaching in Scotland, and that was actually before I was particularly political. Mm-hmm. I was so thoroughly disillusioned by the SNP's curriculum for excellence, or as it was nicknamed in the staff room, the curriculum for excrement. It was just a very progressive top-down policy, and that got me thinking about politics, and you know, maybe a lot of these things that I'd been taking for granted were actually not true. And I ended up in the conservative camp in America really by a process of figuring out what I wasn't. There was all these angry, very opinionated people who had a lot to say about everything, and I thought, it doesn't really appeal to me, so here I am.
Would you describe yourself as a conservative? Because obviously the National Review itself is, isn't it?
I mean, I think so, just because those are the only people who'll have me, Darren, the only people who'll publish.
I'm sure that's not true.
I mean, I think coming from Scotland, I'm probably riven with all the sort of liberalism that one picks up there, and I still struggle with a lot of this sort of anti-Tory biases, but I'm definitely, I think, philosophically conservative. I'd say I'm a conservative, small c conservative. I'm happy calling myself that.
Absolutely. So if we turn to Biden then, what do you think actually explains Biden's pick for VP? What do you think he was looking for in a candidate?
So I think there's three main things that explain his choice of Kamala Harris. And, actually, I'm conscious that I might be saying her name wrong. And before we start, I should actually point out that this can be very controversial in America.
Is that right?
Apparently, it's a sort of microaggression. So Tucker Carlson called her Kamala Harris. And apparently it's more like how Americans say the word comma. So like the punctuation. But of course, I say comma. I imagine you say comma. They say comma. So they say it's Kamala Harris. But Tucker Carlson said Kamala Harris. And this was apparently a sign of his being silently racist. So I'm kind of saying it right. I've got a bit of a complex about it.
So, but the bottom line is, look, any criticism of Kamala Harris is immoral. Anyone who so much as mispronounces her name is a racist. That's what they're telling you. So with that in mind, pretty amusing to watch old Joe Biden himself mispronounce Kamala Harris's name today. Watch.
I told him I wanted to be the last person in the room before he made important decisions. That's what I asked Kamala.
It's just too awesome. Just when you think darkness is descending, old Joe Biden shows up. And the sun begins to rise. Rescued again by Joe Biden. Thank you, Joe. What a bigot.
In any case, I think his choice of Kamala Harris is explained by three things. And those are, number one, she has this record as a prosecutor. She was the Attorney General of California. She seemed to be tough on crime, tough on law and order. That's obviously very important right now if you look at what's happening in the United States. The bursts of civil unrest and often democratic, in fact, if not exclusively democratic municipalities, there's bursts of civil unrest. She's got that law and order feel about her. The second thing, I think, is the obvious identity card that she holds. She is a woman of color. Some people in the press have been calling her African American, but I don't think that's technically right. I think she's half Jamaican, half Indian, and African American is really normally reserved for those who are descendants of African people who were brought here as slaves. So she's got that, which is obviously gives you a lot of political capital just now on the left. And then the third thing is, I've forgotten what it was. Oh yes, no. The third thing is that they're friendly. They go back. She was good friends with his late son, Beau, I think, and they have a bit of rapport, a bit of camaraderie there. So I think in that way it was a fairly standard pick. The other one that people thought maybe he was going to go down the route of was Susan Rice. I was less sure about that just because she would inevitably be pigeonholed as a hang-on from the Obama era, and obviously Trump was really a reaction to the Obama era, so maybe not the wisest election move going into an election to have Susan Rice, who was obviously part of the Obama administration, and have all the connotations and accusations of the failings of that previous administration. So that's I think that answered your question. It's such a long
Absolutely.
way.
No. It beautifully did. But I mean, what it actually is her record during her time in office as Attorney General? Is it a glowing one? Is it one that definitely will enamour her to the American voters?
Oh, certainly not, Darren. In fact, there was a clip, I'm sure you've seen it, that went viral during the debates where Tulsi Gabbard eviscerated Kamala Harris when she brought up all of these very controversial things that she had been involved in. In fact, Gabbard said there were too many to mention, but she did manage to squeeze in 5 or 6. And these included sort of blocking an innocent person from death row, evidence that would have helped them, and prosecuting over, I think, 1,500 people for marijuana violations. All of these sorts of things that really do not go down well with the American public. Because I think mass incarceration is realised now to be a major policy of the previous century, and so. Yes, so she definitely does not have a glowing record at all in that regard.
Now, for a UK audience who doesn't know anything about her at all, and is reading, tweets by the the president himself and other commentators on the right, she's sometimes described as a Marxist. How left-wing do you think she is? Because, it's sometimes argued she's one of the more moderate candidates that Biden could have picked. So, where do you think she sits?
Well, I think to describe her as a Marxist, in my view, affords her slightly more intellectual credit than she necessarily deserves. I don't actually think she's particularly ideological in the sense that she's not really primarily motivated from a place of principle. I really see her as a ruthless opportunist who will say whatever needs to be said in order to secure power. Now, to your point, though, about her being described as a moderate, I think you're absolutely onto something there, because she really is not moderate by any standards. I think you look at Biden, there's lots that Biden says and has said over the course of his long career, which I really disagree with, but I think it would be fair to describe him as a liberal. Kamala Harris is a progressive, and she is a progressive who subscribes to all of the trendy progressive dogmas of our current age, and those include everything that you would expect it to include, from abortion to climate change. And it's also important to put this in the American context for anyone who might be listening, because in America, abortion is, just to pick one example, is a very, very partisan issue, so that on both sides you have what would be perceived in the UK to be quite an extreme position. So Kamala Harris is in favour of late-term abortions, and she has really pushed this, which is a very divisive position on this issue. So she's very uncompromising, just pushes all of these very, very left-wing positions. But again, I think it's more from a place of opportunism and what's trending right now, as opposed to a well-thought-out set of ideological principles.
Now, I'm interested in your thoughts on things that Kamala Harris has said in the past, that I think she did actually verbatim say that she believed that the women who had stepped forward to say Biden made them uncomfortable with unwanted touching. Now, did she say anything else about this, or has she just dropped that? Because I think for the listeners, it's important to just set out that in the States, there were some debates on things like college campuses where there were certain rules, have I got this right, where the woman must always be believed. Was it Title IX or something like that? I can't remember exactly. And that is a big debate in the States. And now, as a Brit watching that, I just think, wow, what happened to innocent until proven otherwise, right? And I wonder, has she moderated her stance on this? On, all women must be believed always, despite evidence?
Yes, so that, again, you're honing in here on one of just countless examples of her hypocrisy. And you're absolutely right to point out that this is a very fraught topic of discussion in the United States. And this was obviously brought to international attention with the Kavanaugh hearing. The Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, who was accused of sexual misconduct from his high school years. Kamala Harris was one of the people involved in interrogating him in the Senate hearing on this, and she was very clear then, as she has been in many interviews and political statements that she's made over the course of her career, that she subscribes to this view that she believes women must be believed, quite apart from what the man might say or what the evidence might be in the particular context or case. She did also, with regards to the specific allegations made against Biden, she did say that she believed those women. Yes. So yes, it does. You do wonder whatever happened to that. Now, I would say she's not the only person guilty of hypocrisy in this way. I think the believe all women thing became very politically inconvenient when these allegations were made against Biden, and she is one of many people who just had to completely drop her principles at the door.
Yes. Ocasio-Cortez, did she say similar things?
Yes. So I think it's one of these things where you can have this get out, I think, if you're a progressive, where you can say that people are problematic. So it's like, well, we accept that Joe Biden is problematic, but have you seen the alternative? That sort of thinking. So another example of that actually would be with race. So in the debates, Kamala Harris brought up Joe Biden's opposition to busing and had said, and she'd actually couched this by saying, I don't think you're a racist, but this was really very personally hurtful to me as a woman of color growing up in California. Actually, she spent a lot of time growing up in Canada, but that's beside the point. And so this was, again, one of those things where you would think, okay, well, she's obviously drawing attention to something she sees as a fault, but obviously it isn't enough to condemn him completely, given that she's now signed on to his ticket.
Mm. What do you think President Trump's strategy will be now that we know who his Biden's running mate is? What do you think he'll actually do to try and beat them?
So I think Trump's strategy was probably going to be the same no matter who Biden picked, and that is really just to say that that Biden and whoever he picked are members of the radical left, set to destroy everything American, rip up the Constitution, do away with your cherished guns, and so on. Mm. And that's already been clear. That's definitely what he is doing. They're also trying to point to her hypocrisy, of which there are plenty of examples of. But I think it's fairly standard stuff coming out from Trump that you would expect, and he probably would be trying no matter who it was.
Yes. How much of a blame is President Trump getting for the economic response to COVID-19?
Well, actually, funny you should say that. So Kamala Harris's first, I really am using her name like interchangeably. Kamala one part, Kamala one part. Because anyone watching this, I'm not being racist. I'm just not sure how to pronounce it. Anyway, sorry, what was the question, Darren?
President Trump's response to COVID-19 as far as the economy's concerned, is he massively getting the blame for job losses, recession, etc., etc.?
Yes, so definitely from the political left, yes. So that was my point. Harris's first speech as her VP, having been nominated as VP, she laid the blame for the greatest economic crisis since the Great Depression right on Trump's desk. She said this is clearly his fault, and I think you could definitely make the case, and many have, and it's a persuasive case that President Trump hasn't done all that he should have to respond to this crisis. But I think to suggest that he is responsible for whatever came out of China and then in fact that the world is a little unfair. But his approval rating is really taking a big hit, and Harris and Biden are, if you're a polls man, then they are on track to win. So it's definitely it's not looking good for Trump.
It's not, but at the same time, it wasn't in 2016 either, was it?
That's true. That's definitely true. And never say never, and it's never too late for things to turn around. It is a very different situation than it was in 2016. For starters, Joe Biden is not Hillary Clinton, and Hillary Clinton's performance with non-college whites was just abysmal. And she set the bar so low, in fact, that actually it wouldn't take that much for Joe Biden to secure the states that were particularly decisive.
Yes. Now, Trump has always been pro-Brexit in his rhetoric. He's broken decisively with, I think, the orthodoxy of foreign policy, which my understanding is that it's long assumed that more European integration is viewed as inherently a good thing. I wonder if you think that this will change under Biden, and that actually Brexit Britain will be, in the words of President Obama, at the back of the queue?
Yeah, so I think, in all honesty, I think it probably hasn't really crossed his mind at this point. So it might be too soon to say what the transatlantic relationship would look like under a Biden administration. I do think that Biden is distinct from Obama in that he does recognize the importance of that relationship, and probably would seek to secure a trade deal. And also remembering that, of course, unlike 2016, he will be starting from a point where Brexit is already a reality. And dragging your feet is actually just bad diplomacy. So I'm not too concerned about that, but as I say, it is too soon to know for sure.
Yes. Now, I wonder, finally, if you might be able to sum up for the listeners why, whether it is Biden or Trump, and given what you've just said, why the special relationship between the UK and the USA is so important to you as a Glaswegian in New York, and something that actually must be defended and cherished. Because we hear time and time again, don't we, that, especially from some pockets of the British media, that the United States is some crazy basket case and, we should keep them at arm's length. But actually, the freedoms and liberties that we all take for granted would be we'd be looking at losing everything if China was to become the dominant power of the globe over the United States. And it's these sorts of messages that I think really go to the very heart of why the special relationship is so important. But I'm keen to hear your thoughts.
No, I completely agree with you. It won't surprise you that I completely agree with you. I think just to give this, rather than wax lyrical with abstractions, I'll give you a concrete example of why it is that I think it is so important. And that is, there was a recent case, Darren, I'm not sure if you followed it particularly closely, of the two British-born ISIS Beatles who were detained by Kurdish forces and then given to the US. Last year, Sajid Javid, then the Home Secretary, decided that the UK just simply didn't have the mechanism to bring these men to trial, to hold them accountable for their horrendous human rights violations. I mean, we really are talking about the worst crimes a human being could possibly commit. And so he had the support of the then Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, and they came to an arrangement where the two men would be stripped of their British citizenship and extradited to the United States. What was fascinating, and I think very revealing, was that the British mainstream media were so out of touch with the British public on whether or not this was appropriate action. The mainstream media were suggesting that they had been sent off to be beheaded somewhere, sent off to be tortured and raped like they did their victims. No, they were being sent to one of the fairest justice systems in the world, where they would have a fair trial, where they would be prosecuted by rule of law, and which would honour this very important relationship and send a message to those who do not respect the values that, as you say, we take for granted, the values of free speech and freedom of assembly and freedom of religion, and all of these things that enable you to have, as the Americans say, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I think that it is a real shame that so much of our culture now is this self-loathing, self-sabotaging attitude towards America and the parts of the UK that are considered to be more conservative. But I would say that one thing that was interesting is that when you looked at the polling of what the British public felt ought to be done with these guys, it was clear there's dissatisfaction with the left-wing ideology in the UK and in the US, which is trying to turn in on itself. And actually, this relationship is, I would say, the most important relationship in securing the freedoms of the free world. So I give that concrete example just as a way of showing what the alternative could be. You think you got it back, you think America is terrible, you think that the UK is terrible, go try live in Syria, go try live in Iran, see how you like it there, you know, see what they do to gay people and women over there. You know, so I think it would be impossible to make too much of the importance of the special relationship.
Absolutely. I mean, how many times do the groups like Extinction Rebellion kick up a fuss in this country, in the United Kingdom, which is, 1% of global CO2 emissions? They wouldn't dare try that sort of thing in China, you know?
Right, no, exactly. It is one of the ironies that your ability to castigate your own government is kind of proof that things are as they should be. Because if things were really just the worst place on earth, then well, first of all, you can leave.
Yes.
Nobody's making you stay here. Like, if you really hate it that much, why don't you leave? And then also, you have freedom of speech. You have the ability to criticize your own government. How fantastic is that?
Absolutely. Now, I think all that's left for me to do is wave my American flag, which I have perfectly positioned right next to me. No, but thank you so much for that. I think that's really insightful and will have helped a lot of people who do not know who the American candidates are and give them an insight into it. So thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Where can people find you on Twitter? Because you are a beautiful writer and people need to read your work.
They can find me at Madeline Kearns, and that's Madeline Kearns.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you.